Welcome to Feral Faith, where life is messy, but we're here for it all. I'm Cassidy,
And I'm Amber.
two friends and moms just trying to survive and thrive in this wild, beautiful chaos.
So we invite you into our living room where things may get a little fierce and spicy as we press in. No sugarcoating here, just real talk, real faith, and wildly present conversations.
We're showing up and letting our roars out. So buckle up, it's about to get real.
This is Feral Faith.
Oh, Feral Faith, episode 4, coming at you live.
You're not going to give us a feral for this one?
This is the Feral 4 meeting on,
Yeah. We're
whatever.
a little spicy today. Our
Oh.
pre-recording conversations have us all like, whoo, this is going to be good.
In a tizzy, trying to relax the face and chill.
Oh, is that what it is? It's exercising.
Oh, settle in. Yeah. It's fine. We're doing great. We're fine.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So I am getting ready to visit Amber. So in the midst of just running around and getting myself and my children and the things together, we've been unpacking this notion of feral still. And it's interesting because these things keep coming up in conversation. I had a conversation with my husband this morning and I feel like a lion in a cage. Like, that sounds familiar. We're just talking about that. And we're trying to tie some concepts in. I don't know if any of you follow the biblical feasts or are aware, but this is the season of Passover. This is being recorded the Thursday prior to Passover. Which we could get into a whole theological debate on. Jesus was probably dead at this point. So it's just kind of an interesting week that we're walking in. And we've been sitting with this concept of the Israelites, the Exodus, the wilderness, our wilderness, society as a whole, and this pendulum shift. We were challenging each other about sourdough, our homesteads, going homeschool. And it's not just like isolated, right, Amber? It's not just a you and me thing. It's trending on Facebook, these notions of I want to get back to my roots, make my own food, I make jokes all the time about how I want to be on a hobbit commune, like invite only with a boat access. Like, I want to do life with people, and like be intimate with my people and share the children and share the responsibility, and because it's not making us healthy. So we've just been kind of unpacking how feral applies into this week.
Well, and you're a bit outnumbered with the children too, huh?
Always
There's a 1-to-3 ratio there.
It is. It's great.
Well, at least there'll be a 2-to-4 here soon. So
Correct.
we'll have a week
Correct.
It's gonna be evening it out. Yeah.
It's gonna be good.
Well, think about like how many reels or memes have you and I sent each other about give me chickens, or we see it all the time on there about chicken math, or and maybe it's just because my algorithm is set to that more relaxed lifestyle where I get those, and I love it where the one that sent the husband to the store for groceries and he comes back with she asked for eggs and milk and he brings her chickens and goats.
Yeah.
Or maybe she went and got it. I don't remember exactly what it was. But I do think that idea of when we leave the systems of man, we have this pull to going back to that, I think you call it like the primitive state, right? Like that more natural state, that more of that created identity of gosh, I really want to know what goes into my food.
Right.
I really want to know what's coming into my house. Like I don't want to just keep going and eating out of the hand of Pharaoh, right? Like it was this idea of we want to be healthy. And it's interesting enough that when I became feral, food was one of the first things that I adjusted, like, rest and food. And it's interesting when you follow the wilderness examples in the scriptures, you kind of notice that pattern that as soon as Yahweh delivered the children of Israel out of the hand of Pharaoh and he puts them into the wilderness, he feeds them and he tells them to rest, right? I'm going to feed you and I want you to rest. Enter into my rest. And I think we all long for that. Like, I think when I look through some of the Facebook pages that I follow or some of the pictures that I find out there, that idea of that I'm not trying to go back to prairie living. I'm not trying to go back to 1950s household wife. Like I want to know what Pharaoh looks like in my lifetime,
Right.
right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to get dreads and tats, just saying.
I have enough for us, so it's fine. We're
Okay,
covered.
so you'll share.
I'll share.
Share.
It's
Yeah, can
fine.
you just take them off and
Yeah,
pass them around?
probably.
Oh.
We interrupt this program for an important news announcement.
So, I have something exciting to share with you guys. We are launching a new program this fall called Empower Her. This is something that's been brewing in my heart for several years. We are going to rent a beautiful Airbnb in Arvada, Colorado, and we're going to pile it in together for the weekend. We're going to cook together, we're going to spend time together, and we're going to journey with you for about 4 months as we help you overcome spiritual stagnation, any relational disconnects, and your traumas.
Applications are opening for May 7th, and it's a really exciting opportunity to take the trauma healing work that Amber and her ministry have been practicing in, and we're expounding on things to give anyone who wants to embrace their healing journey time to really settle in and grow. And we're going to be life coaching every week and doing weekly Zoom meetings to continue building those relationships. So check us out at www.aministryofpresence.org, and you can find the Empower Her page and get all the details and the application there. We look forward to hearing and seeing you guys.
But I just think you see that pattern, like even Elijah, when he ran into the wilderness, right after that escapade with Jezebel, God's like, yeah, hungry and take a nap,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Maybe you're
Yes.
hangry. Maybe you just need to take a nap. And
Right.
then John the Baptist out in the wilderness, like I don't know what his lifestyle was, other than we know that he ate grasshoppers and honey and wore camel skin, or camel hair. So I wonder if, as we in our culture, because we're in a system of man that is like slavery, right? We are enslaved to our jobs. We're enslaved to credit. We're enslaved to this American lifestyle that's not working for us. It's not
Right.
serving us. And interesting enough, when the children of Israel were in the wilderness, and they're having this moment of, oh my gosh, we've got to depend on God for our food. We have to depend on God to get us through. And we've got these enemies that are against us. We've got all of this like trust issues in the wilderness with relying on God being our source. They said, we'd rather go back to Egypt where we know we'll have food.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting
Yeah.
that in the trial and in the tribulation of working out the slavery mentality, they would rather go back to the old because trusting in God in the new is scary.
Yeah. Well, how many times have you and I said, understanding now what we understand about the nervous system, when we embark on a new journey? So, for me it was going on my healing journey. I know for you it was starting your healing journey. This whole idea of newness is really overwhelming input for the nervous system because
Mm-hmm.
it's comfortable with familiarity. So I think we said it on the last episode, this idea, or we said it in one of our talks. It was this idea that
One of our unrecorded ones. Yeah.
one of the chit chats we done had while I was pounding out walking on my treadmill or something, right? We made a joke about doing treadmill talks with Amber&Cassidy, but it's not a fitness program. So anyway, this
Or is it?
idea, or is it? It's a different kind of fitness. But we were talking about how our amygdalas are done by the time we're 7 years old. So your responses to your environment are figured out in your childhood. And I know that may irk people like, I'm not my parents, but you totally
Mm-hmm.
are. You're
Mm-hmm.
responding to your environment, and you're not doing it on a conscious level. It's your nervous system making decisions about what it needs to do to be safe because our brains are made to keep us alive.
Yeah.
That's literally what they do, is keep you functioning. So when you go into a space of I need to get healed or I need something different, and the way it was put to me one time is you have this really old lumpy icky sweater but it's comfortable, and it doesn't look good, and maybe it smells a little funny, and it's not serving you, like it's holy and it looks bad and it's all stretched out, but it's comfortable. and you don't want to put on the new sweater because maybe it's a little stiff, or maybe it itches a little different, or maybe it's just, it's all tight in the right places or the wrong places, and you just don't even want to try it because it's not comfortable. So when you go into a season of healing or growth, none of it's comfortable. And if it is comfortable, that should be challenging for you to go, something about this is too familiar. Because when we continue seeking patterns of familiarity, we're actually not growing.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Mm-hmm.
Israelites saying we would rather go back to slavery is this direct correlation to what all these neurologists and psychologists are talking about now regarding the nervous system and these patterns of behavior. Because 2000 years ago, we didn't have TMRI, so we couldn't study their brain response when they came out of this horrendous situation. But now with all the data surrounding, microphysiology, you can look at things in epigenetics and look at trauma's responses in the tissues. Like, it is down to a microcellular level. So of course the Israelites said, we can't do this. We came out of bondage for 400 years. The generations only know it. We can't leave it,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Well, and he says that Yahweh himself gives third and fourth generation language, right? Like these things, like if you can trust me, if you can enter into my rest, if you can, follow me through this journey, I will bless you and your generations, right? Like
Yeah.
he said up to 1,000 generations
Yeah.
will be blessed if you follow me. And then he's like, but if you disobey me or you run from me or you find that this is too hard for you to comprehend or enter into, I'm, you're going to suffer for 3 and 4 generations. Like it's going to be
Right.
passed on to your children's children's children.
Right.
And we see that in our culture. We see these traumas being passed down. We see these generations of patterns that are just being replicated over and over again. And we are, I think, our generation, maybe I almost see myself as like partly feral. Like I'm getting there, I'm getting closer to it. But my dad started that journey. Like my whole side of my dad's side of the family, I think, was feral or
Mm-hmm.
was
Mm-hmm.
starting that of like, hey, we're going to break out the systems of man and did things that were so bizarre or considered radical
Yeah.
according to what is there now. But now people are like, you did that, you know how to make bread, you know how to preserve your food, and all these skills that have been lost are now starting to resurface in a very high um I don't know, capacity or whatever you want to call it. Like it's like people are or grasping onto it and really fast and creating whole, like just the other day in our little neighborhood or our little community up here had a bread making class. Like thinking about that, like, huh, that's interesting. Like to
Yeah.
have these classes that are popping up. People are making successful businesses by returning back to some of these. Like I sell my eggs, and that sale of my eggs covers the food costs, right? So there's these ideas of like, hey, returning back to the simplicity of things.
Right.
Well, that's the same for our faith walk, right?
Right.
We've named this feral faith because our faith is being restored back to this idea of simplicity, the way God created it, the way He wanted it to be done.
Right.
And because we have replicated years of these patterns that are contrary to the way the king established them, to others, it looks crazy.
Right.
It looks like, oh my gosh. And they would rather run back to the box when there's a question than it would be to press in to trust God that He's going to bring the answer to it, or to find others that are sitting around the fire pit to talk about these things,
Right. Right.
because it feels a bit uncomfortable to think that I have to listen to Jesus myself, right? Like maybe they don't
Right.
even know how to do that. Maybe one of these podcasts we can talk about what that looks like to really sit and listen to Jesus, but then do it in community as well, where
Right.
He's the King. Holy Spirit being the ruler of that gathering, and that's hard
Right.
for people to comprehend because we've been told by the systems of man you have to have this preacher or this pastor overseeing all of the spiritual.
Right.
I had a brother one time say that if we look at the patterns of the Egyptians, or I'm sorry, the Israelites leaving Egypt, and how when God talked about third and fourth generations through disobedience, He also said, look at it from a spiritual too, like your spiritual life. that what we inherited spiritually may take 3 and 4 generations for us to break out of that mold. So
Right.
you and I may not see the fullness of what this lifestyle of leaving behind the institution looks like,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
But our children might experience something that is fantastic. Their spiritual life may grow just like their bodies are with eating good bread or eating
Right.
good food.
Right.
What
Yeah.
about their spiritual life?
Right. And that to me has felt the most important coming out of this space because I don't come from a faith-based background. So Amber and I differ in that way because she comes from a totally different walk. And my family, it was, you know, Americanism. And it's not to say there's anything necessarily wrong with ambition and focus and working hard, but the idea that you work to live or live to work, whatever the bad one is, it's this concept of you must do, you must accomplish, you must achieve. And then I took that into the beginning of my faith journey of works. And it's still something I've been working out, especially in this new season of my life, which is very low relational just because we've moved and it takes time to cultivate quality relationship, not just people for the sake of not being alone. Breaking out of all those kind of codependent behaviors, we'll talk about that on another episode, but it's learning that he's done the work. I don't have to do the work and I can take that burden off myself and I can rest. I can steward what I've been given well. I can steward my children because people look at you when you even say you homeschool. You know, I knew one family growing up that homeschooled, and they were the religious family with the jean skirt down to the ankles and the braid down to their butt. Like it was exactly what you'd think it was.
Did you meet
And
my family?
um, Amber, it was Amber. No, I'm kidding. It wasn't. But but do you see what I'm saying? It's like
Mhm.
it was so obtuse. And now post COVID, there's been such a seed of, um, like second guessing and doubt. Like it really called into question the institution of man. And that's not to play either side of the aisle. It's just the reality of what happened, whether you fell on one side or the other. People started to go, I don't know if I'm being told the truth. I actually don't know if this is good for me. I actually need to call this into question. And like so many other Americans, that's when my life fell apart. And I did an honest inventory and said, what's not serving me? Oh, all these different institutions. And when I went into church to experience God, I felt like I was being shackled. Like I couldn't worship the way I wanted. People would tell me I was being too loud. And I'm like, too loud? I read about King David and he's making himself a fool. He's embarrassing his wife in front of his kingdom. Like no holds bar, celebrating Yahweh, the creator of the universe and the cosmos. But I have to stand in my spot and sing about him, not to him, but about him. And there's nothing wrong with corporate worship. I've been to
Mhm.
some really beautiful corporate gatherings where there's flagging and there's yelling and people are busting out in their prayer language, and it's beautiful. I've seen people fall in the spirit at those things. It's amazing. But this idea that we have to play by a rule book to then experience him, like that's control. That's fit the mold here in our expression of belief. If you don't play by the rules or you come and you're too feral, you can't come here anymore. And that is a problem. That's a control issue. That's not a spirit of Jesus. That's a control problem. He went to the outcasted. He didn't seek out the people who fit the mold of religion. And somehow that's been lost on our culture of church. And
Mhm.
the fact that we can look at all these institutions and go, I don't think the food industry is being good to me. I don't know if healthcare is being good to me in the ways it should. I don't know if the education system, that's a big thing right now. The education system and what's being taught to my children or whose rights are being taken away during when and all these issues, they're not serving me. But who's looking at the church and the inventory of the church, the institution of the church? Because Amber and I still do church with thousands of people. And it's around a meal. It's talking to each other. It's driving down. We used to live up at the top of a mountain. We drive down because we used to do food ministry and help people who needed food for their families because they're working and it's expensive to eat. I don't know if anyone else knows that right now, but
Yes.
it's we would talk about Jesus and press in and sharpen about these
Mm.
issues. And God would give dreams and it would bring challenging conversation. Like, it wasn't, I must keep parts of me separate. It was, wow, God gave you a dream about dirty things in my life. I guess we'll unpack that in the car here. And we did, because we learned to establish safety, because our culture says stay separate. Our culture
Mhm.
says individualism. Our culture says you must execute. Except the mothers are the most unhealthy. Our men are super unhealthy. Our children are showing behavioral issues. They're not knowing who they are. We're getting sicker. We're dying younger. And yet, as the body of Christ, we're elevated above and out of those things. But are
Yeah.
we? What's the data
Yeah.
say?
Yeah. Well, when you said that word, like we're more separated, I was thinking of well, just because we're in the week of getting leaven out of our house,
Right?
right? Like we this morning we ate the last of the loaf of leavened bread, so yeast bread. We finished that up as we prepare for Cassidy's family to come in, and then we're going to celebrate, unleavened together. Like we physically remove it as a demonstration to let that object lesson speak to us.
Right?
It's not about like my salvation. My salvation is not online if I eat leaven or don't eat leaven.
Right?
It's not, that's never what we're making this about. It's because Yahweh is trying to paint a picture for us
Right?
to say, hey, when the children of Israel had to leave Egypt, they had to leave it all behind.
Right?
But it's interesting the things that they did take with them. They took their bread pans, who were empty. They didn't because they had just had frogs in them, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So they had frogs, they had flies. It was nasty. They couldn't even make bread, and it was okay. Now we got to go. And they took their limited goods with them, but their bread pans was one that they took with them. And it says that they had to make the bread without leaven, and so it becomes a feast of remembrance for us to remember the leaven that has been removed from our life.
Right?
Yeshua is the Passover lamb, so he settles the deal with sin. Leaven is about what systems of man, what thoughts, what patterns, what beliefs have I mixed with Jesus, right?
Right?
So if I've mixed politics, because Jesus said, beware of the leaven of Herod, that was politics. So, what politics have we allowed into our religious systems? How about the religious systems that we've also incorporated, right? So there's this huge mixture going
Yep.
on, medical,
The
all of
leaven of the
this system,
Pharisees.
the leaven of the Pharisees, all
Yeah.
of this. But then he says something else about leaven where he says it represents the kingdom. So there's this idea of that when we re-leaven ourselves, now we're going to do it with the leaven that he provides for us in the wilderness. Like sourdough, this whole push of making bread at home and this whole is by catching wild yeast that's in the air.
Right?
It's also on the kernels. So the wheat can also ferment itself because there's wild yeast that has just grown on the kernel of that whole wheat berry. So then you can catch it in the air, you can catch it. So what have we caught in our lives that has to be um, redone? So I threw out my sourdough this year. Where it's like, nope, we're throwing it out. Every year we throw it out and then we start over. And
Hmm.
that's painting this picture of us go as we've gone into the wilderness. It's not a bad thing. We're relearning the systems of Yahweh so that when we go back into with being with our brothers and sisters, we don't have all of this taintedness that's bringing with it.
Right?
But as thinking about sourdough, we have some funny stories that
Yeah, we
surround
do.
sourdough.
Yeah, we do. I have some really tragic stories around sourdough. So, for those of you who are not necessarily as familiar with geography, I now live at um, zero elevation. So, I'm at, sea level. Once upon a time, I lived at 8,300 feet with Amber. And if that changes baking dramatically,
Significantly,
like
yes.
you never get a beautiful muffin. They're always a little
No.
sad, and
Yes.
It's part of it, but trying to learn how to do sourdough, when I started homeschooling my kids and I wanted chickens and sourdough, like it's really a gateway drug, as people call it. Like it really
So,
is.
yeah.
And I was trying to figure out how to do sourdough, and I don't think it was, which was it when we were staying with you? Was it a feast? I brought bread. I think it was one of the feasts. I think it might have been like Sukkot that I brought this
No, I
loaf
think it
of
was a
bread.
Sabbath. It
Maybe
was
it
when we
was a
were doing
Sabbath. Yeah, so I show up and I'm so happy because I get this bread and it's crisped on the outside instead of like sad looking on the outside. And I'm like, oh, it knocks and you hear it and it looks good and it was in there for all this time. And I'm so excited. It was Fred the second, my second sourdough. And we cut into it and the inside is not fully cooked. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like it's your worst nightmare. My worst nightmare is if I cook something for somebody or I give a
And it
gift.
wasn't just a little wet.
Oh, it was like
Like
it
it
wasn't good.
oozed. It was
It,
almost like a brie cheese or
yeah.
something.
Yeah, like burrata, you
It oozed.
open it up and it was not good. And I was so upset. I was so disappointed. Amber then later was like, I really want to get you a Dutch oven. What color do you want? And I was like, "Aw, thanks, friend." But it took months to figure out how to do sourdough, and I finally figured it out once I got the cooking right. It wasn't just this idea of fermenting and it not getting disgusting and then being able to do the stretch and folds because you have to do more of those in altitude. And
And
then
remember when you brought one to an event?
I did. And I was stretching and folding because I was making the sourdough for I think for
Yeah, the
another
Sabbath.
night
It was this.
for
Yeah, it was the
yeah.
next. But it
I
was so
worked
funny.
I
It
worked
was a
really
whole
hard on it.
thing. It's a whole thing,
It's a
right?
whole thing.
It's a whole thing.
Yeah. But doesn't that paint the perfect physical?
Hmm.
Like God replicates. He says that. He says like the temple is the replication of what's in heaven. Like when we manifest things on earth, it's a replication of what we manifest in heaven. Isn't sourdough the idea of leaven because they didn't have yeast packets
Hmm.
2000 years ago? That was not a thing. So the idea of we have to start the bread over and go through this process and feed it and get rid of some and feed it again and get rid of some. And it needs to be taken care of in this way to get the outcome that you want. Such an idea example to us. That's just bread. Forget about
Yeah,
the other things we could
I
play on.
know.
Like just
I
it's
know. It's amazing. Well, and also thinking too is that it to perfect that loaf of bread, it took practice,
right.
right? It put you community pushed you into this thing of like, I've got to figure this out, right? Like
Hmm.
I want to bring something of myself to this communal meal so that it's kind of pushing us into this idea of like, I've got to learn how to do this,
Yeah.
right? And even if it was yucky, I didn't stop being her friend. I didn't separate from her because we experienced some yuck, right? Like it's
Yeah.
like, no, we pressed in and actually let me help you with that, right? Let me
Yeah.
get you something to help with that so that it can be perfected into, like you can learn another take it a different level. So the idea of like bread making in other cultures is community based,
Right.
right? There's communal ovens. I worked at one for a while when I lived in South America. Maybe one of these days we can unpack some of those stories. But it was bread making was a whole ordeal. And it took several people to get in there and hot fires and all those things that it was very communal based. We are still isolating in a lot of
Hmm.
our bread making, so to speak, in our leavening,
Right.
thinking, well, I can go catch the yeast. I can go do this on my own. I. And we have forgotten this fact that no, actually, the feasts of God, the Sabbaths of God, the meals of God, the community of God is
It's a
togetherness.
we.
We cannot separate. You cannot even make bread without yeast multiplying itself because that is what is fermenting and eating, and the bacteria is multiplying and multiplying and multiplying. It's creating its own colony,
Right. Right.
right? And the yeast of man have created colonies, but it has created separateness to where it's not life-giving.
Right.
These loaves are like bricks that we're throwing at each other, and he's saying, hey, let's get that out. Let's re-leaven ourselves with the leaven of the kingdom, and let's come together to help perfect this loaf, or help, whatever that he's looking at for the body of Messiah to grow up and say, hey, stop serving up the doughy bread.
Yeah,
Stop.
yeah. Well, and the thing that I want to share about the doughy bread too was Amber didn't shame me into it. She was just like, "Oh, that's gross." But it wasn't like I'm condemning you. She made a judgment on my bread and was like, "Ooh, there's some work still that needs
I'm
to be
not eating
done."
that, honey. I'm sorry.
No.
We just cut around it,
We
right?
did.
Like we just.
We ate the outside. And it was one of
Mhm.
those things where like it was a healthy shame for me. Like I brought you my product and we looked inside and I was like, "Ooh, that's a little funky and it needs to be that needs to be improved." And that's
Yeah.
a story again of what our relationship has been like. Hey, this is the icky. Here's some icky in this. Like I'm unpacking and it looks nice on the outside, but there's a little icky. And we've lost this organic nature of being people together and doing it together, and we hoard it. We keep it ourselves for me, for my family, when it's supposed to be shared
Mhm.
and it's supposed to be given freely. Like we're not supposed to be storing treasures up, and that includes relational togetherness. And we don't do that. And it's been really interesting just to even examine Passover. It was how many tens of thousands of people doing it together. Like there's no privacy in enslavement. You've lost all your rights. But there was this idea that we're going to come together and celebrate our emancipation,
Mhm.
and why we've completely taken that out and just justified going on Sunday. Maybe we'll talk about the Word of God, but it's not open participatory. It's not sharing our burdens and our real struggles, because how many of us have experienced rejection? How many of us experienced a bad leaven being sown in there because of
Mhm.
condemning words, or it's too messy, you don't fit the mold, but I want to
Yeah.
belong. And
Yeah.
that's not how the body works. We're all belonging and we're all supposed to come together.
Right. Well, I think we might could even get a part three out of this.
Oh, here we
But
go. Hang on tight, guys. Part 27 coming at you for Pharaoh.
yeah, but I do believe we've reached a place in our culture, and in our, even our church culture, is that every man is doing what is right in his own eyes. And in that separateness, the enemy comes in and he creates such havoc. I wish we had had more time to unpack their wilderness experience, but Yahweh says, I'm not going to send you directly into the promised land because I want you to overcome the evil ones, right? Like I want you to
Right,
overcome these giants that are in the land. And I think sometimes we have forced the wilderness experience to, because it feels whatever it is, that we get scared and we're like, I'm going to run back to the pots of Egypt, or hurry up and get me there, which is part of our when we do trauma healing, we talk about that journey through
yeah,
grief and that journey through forgiveness. Is sometimes we rush to the end of it because it feels so uncomfortable.
right,
Again, back to that conversation of the nervous system, of realizing, actually, if I endure and I push through it, I will receive healing. I will be made whole. I will
right.
be ready to take the promised land with my people. And I think there's another scripture where he talks about, oh, Jesus, like let's look at Jesus' example, overcoming the wilderness and the temptation of the
Yeah,
enemy, so that he could demonstrate to us, you can do it too. He didn't go through the wilderness and then say, hey guys, I overcame it, so you don't have to go through it. No, he went through it to show us that there
yep,
is a way to overcome it. All the disciples had to go through their own journey of experiencing the wilderness, and most believers need to go through it. And I think we've rushed that experience
right,
to where now we have people who don't know how to overcome. They don't know how to fight their battles. And so they retreat, they run back to Pharaoh, they run back to their separateness, they run back to this idea of, it's really hard. Yeah, it
right,
is. It
right.
really is. It can suck really bad
Yep,
sometimes because it's like, I have to depend on Yahweh to bring me the bread, to
yep,
bring me the quail, to show up. Maybe sometimes it's a fasting
yeah,
season where I suffer in, like, oh, it doesn't feel good, but he's asking us to do it.
right. Right.
And he's equipping his people to do it.
And he wants to equip us. But the thing is, we are in this culture of get it quick, get it now, and keep going on. And that's if anyone's ever gone into the nature to go camping or whatever, it's way more labor intensive. Like
Oh my
glamping is
gosh.
terrific, but you still, even if you have a camper, you have to set up the sewage stuff. You need to run your generator. You're still trying to deal with cooking. You're in a confined space. Like it's not a comfortable experience, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And I guess we will have to make a part 3 because we're probably running out of time here, but it's just something really
Woohoo!
significant to just take pause in the fact that the Israelites were out there for 40 years and they blew it still, you know, had
Mm-hmm.
to get it out of them. And you know, we're seeing it now. Like there's a shift in the people and people are saying, no, I think I'm missing something. Like I'm actually
Yeah.
missing something and I'm not satisfied. And,
Yeah.
you know,
Woohoo!
maybe your leaven is icky and it's time to toss your sourdough and start over
That's right.
and do it with a
That's
friend
right.
because they'll tell you
Do
if you
it
need a
with a
Dutch
friend.
oven. Yes.
They
Yes.
might get you the Dutch oven too.
They
Yeah.
might, and they might let you
Yeah.
pick your color. Guys, make
Yes.
sure that you like and subscribe, listen with a friend, help us get this word out there because there's lots of people who are isolated right now and feeling this disconnection. And we are happy to be a voice in the wilderness. And we are just so overwhelmed and humbled to be in a position to give some validation and speak into some really challenging things. But yeah, we're
Yeah.
uh we're gonna well next time we record it'll be after our visit, so it will have some
Oh, we might have some great subject matter
we'll
then,
have
huh?
great stories
We might
for
not even
sure.
be able to wait. We may have to share the microphone.
Yeah, I know I might be right next to you like me too. All
Pass
right,
it back and
guys.
forth. All
Yes,
right.
this is
See
Feral
you next
Faith
time.
signing off.